what do these stories that I'm telling about my life, what do they show about the true me? Besides the individual minds, there's also shared mind. If you get enough of that shared mind on the same peaceful wavelength, it's contagious.
If you can, just describe your experience, and the reader gets to learn what they're going to learn, and it may be the thing that you'd want to teach them. Well, hi, Marty.
Good afternoon.
It is afternoon. Today is 25th of February that we're recording this. It's about 1:20 in the afternoon. And my name is Bill Terry. This is another episode of the True You podcast, and this is my partner, Marty Kettlehead.
Yes, who knows what time people listen to this? It could be,
Anytime. It'd be evening, morning, afternoon, middle
but
of.
for us, it's the middle of the week and the middle of the day.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm in my flex week, meaning that I usually don't schedule coaching appointments during this last week of the month. Every once in a while, I'll do makeup coaching sessions, but this is a week for me to either relax or get caught up or work on projects, and I'm doing a little bit of all of that this week.
Even in a shorter month, like February.
Yeah. So I'm doing sessions 3 weeks out of every month.
I see. Great.
Yeah. So you brought up a great topic, I think, that might make for an interesting conversation. Let's see where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't I just hand it off to you and just let you explain what your idea is, and let's see what happens in this talk.
Yeah, well, more of this could come up later when we talk to Jerry Wexler again later in March. Because what got me going on this topic was that I, like you, am writing a memoir. Mine is specifically around the topic of beauty, right? So I'm not telling like my life, in general, but they're what's led me to my view of beauty. These experiences. Anyway, it was having him as a guest last year that got me thinking that this would be a better way, because it's a philosophical topic. What is beauty? And it's only been, generally speaking, we don't discuss it and as a topic. We just say, oh, that's beautiful. I like that. That's pretty, right? But why do we say that? Why do we attribute to that? And so for me, it's a philosophical topic, and I've studied it in school too. And yet I don't want to write a philosophical tract. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to prove a point, right? It's not an exposition, right? Or trying to convince anybody of anything like that. So when we spoke with Jerry last year, I was like, oh, maybe I should write it as just like a journey, the journey of my experiences that taught me what I have come to see about beauty, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of just background for, then as I'm writing each time, and I'm quite early into this, but each time I think of something that was formative, mm-hmm, that I want to write about, then I think to myself, I'm like, well, why was this so important to me? What was important? What does this say about the true me?
Yeah.
That I want to tell this story, right? And that it has to do with beauty. So I was just thinking about all that question. And I just this morning, I was writing about an experience, because it has to do with Wagner's music, which has a lot of connotations. People have ideas about what that means. Oh, I hate that stuff. It's so bombastic. Is one of the main things I hear people say. Or wasn't he a Nazi? That's another thing people say. Of course, he died before Hitler. But the Nazis loved some of the things he wrote. They exploited them in his absence, and his sister participated in that. She outlived him, and anyway, so there are those associations, right? And so I was thinking this, like, why was this so important to me? I remember the first opera of his that I got to know was the last one he wrote. And it opens really slowly. And it's not bombastic at all. It's subtle. And it's like almost like ethereal, just this atmospheric music, right? And it moves very slowly. And I just remember sitting and listening to this. It was long before I ever saw a production of it.
You were listening on an LP? Yeah. Okay. And as you listened, what did you experience?
I was like sucked in, like, whoa, this is work. There's a huge, you could just feel there's a huge arch to this. Like it's an epic story unfolding here. Right. And I noticed like how the music was working too. So I do like epic stories. I like big, things that grab your attention and keep you, like a book that, you open it up and you read the first page and like, oh boy, this is gonna be a nice long haul, and I'm into this. And I also, I could hear how the music worked. Wagner doesn't write like most composers. He uses leitmotifs. So they're little snippets of music that have significance, and he's constantly like stretching them out and turning them around and putting them in different contexts, like with a different accompaniment underneath, or sung versus in the violins. And so he tells the story through the music, so I could hear the story without
Wait, you're saying that you just heard music. Did you also hear opera singers that were vocalizing the story?
That comes eventually, but it takes a while before he gets.
So you're already feeling the energy of the story before you actually get some formation around it through the language that the singers provide.
Yes, exactly. And like most operas, most of the time you can't tell what the singers are saying anyway.
Right.
Right? That's unless.
Did you already know the story before you listened to the music? You could just sense the story through the music. And the opera singers weren't helpful because you can't understand their words.
Basically, yeah. I mean,
and you're only listening. You're not watching. So somehow you had the experience of a story only from listening to music and words that you didn't understand.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
I mean, eventually I went and consulted the libretto to see, like, what are they saying, and get familiar with the story.
And how close were you? Was it accurate to what you had imagined that the story was being told through the music?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right.
Oh, wow. So,
this way that he writes,
yeah,
it helps anybody listening to do this. Like, it's not like
I don't know if just anybody can do that, Marty. I think that what you're describing is extra. I think it's something that I can't imagine. I mean, I appreciate music as well. Mm-hmm. I notice all the different instruments and the different harmonies and how the ebb and flow of the music and the tempo and the volume. And I can appreciate all of that, but I don't imagine stories from that music. And certainly don't imagine them accurately to what the composer might have intended.
Well, it's not like, I don't mean to say like that. I could say, oh, there's a table there and somebody's walking over to the table and now he's taking a drink, or like, it wasn't details.
But you had a sense of the emotional movement of the story.
Very much. Oh, clearly. Yes.
Right.
So
here's what I'm really interested in. And I don't know if you're doing this in your memoir or not. When you say memoir, what I think of is it's almost like an autobiography. It's the telling of a period of someone's life or their entire life. And this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And so I'm imagining this would be so much fun for you to write about the experience that you're now describing to me. But
Exactly.
but the challenge is going to be, and this is what I learned from Jerry as I was writing my first of 3 parts of my memoir,
Mhm.
that I need to remember that I'm bringing the reader along with me. The reader really wants to go along for the ride as if they are me, or, at least are in close proximity to me and watching my life unfold.
Right, exactly.
And that turned out to be quite a challenge because, and this is what Jerry caught me in, and maybe we can talk to Jerry when he comes in a couple of weeks and ask him about this. But I wanted to teach. When I first started writing my memoir, I wanted to teach people as I was writing it. And he said, you're going to lose them if you do that.
Right. That's the number one thing that I've gotten from your feedback. The beginning of the book that you read. It's like, oh, I'm not here to teach. Like that's the number one thing is like, no, and so I've edited quite a bit since you read that.
Yeah.
And so, yes, no, it's not about teaching. It's about showing what the experience was like for me. Like this fascination with this piece of music unfolding and sucking me in, and like, what is this?
And here's the thing, the magic that I've discovered about that is that if you can just describe your experience and tell us what you got from it in the moment that you got it, then the reader gets to learn what they're going to learn, and it may be the thing that you'd want to teach them if you were teaching.
Mm-hmm.
That's what so like in my book starts out at 5 years old and spans all the way up till I'm 27 years old, and I've just collected my 30-day medallion of getting sober.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not teaching anything in that 22-year span, but the readers of the book are telling me that they're learning a lot about themselves, about recovery, about the nature of addiction and that sort of thing. And I'm not at any point in the book am I saying, here, let me tell you about addiction. Let me tell you about, the lesson that I learned from this. Not at all.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And the sample that I read of your book.
Did what I just say sound like I was trying to teach you something?
Oh, no. I think that I'm just stacking on to what you're already saying. And what I understand you to say is that you're just telling the story. And I'm just really supporting that you do that because you're a tremendous writer. And I think I told you this too in my review of what you sent me, was that the thing I enjoyed the most out of the sample that you gave me was the description of you crashing on your moped.
Yeah.
Not because I wanted to see you hurt, but the way you just
using that insight that the way that was written was substantially different than the other parts you read. To write the rest of it, like I reviewed, like, oh, look at the way I did that. That's the kind of writing that I need to do here around the Wagner, for example, right?
Yes, and if I could, so I don't know who Wagner is, and so even as we were talking here just now, you said now most people. My only reaction to that is who's Wagner. So I don't know who your reader's going to be, but it doesn't matter that I don't know who Wagner is.
I don't want to teach them who Wagner is either. I just I want it to just flow. Like
I want to know, yeah, exactly. When I'm reading your memoir, I want to know about what was it like for Marty to go through these different ages of his life and have these experiences and learn what he learned. And
right, and I think that is what has led me to this topic for the true. Like, okay, so what is true about what do these stories that I'm telling about my life that relate to beauty, what do they show about the true me?
And I could feel that as you were describing with the passion that you described it just now in this conversation, that it taps into something that's true for you.
And this particular story this opera, I should say, is a hero's journey story. And, I've been exposed to other, like Star Wars is a hero's journey story.
Yeah.
And the Lord of the Rings is a hero's journey story. There are lots of them that we're familiar with. And there was something about like this hero. He's a nature boy. Like he's been wandering around lost in the woods. And he he shoots his arrow and kills a dove. I'm not a dove, a swan, which is then and all these the monks who live on this sacred land, they come up, they're like, what did you do? You just killed the sacred swan. Who are you? What is going on here? That's where the story initiates, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so I kind of identify with his innocence, right? And that he is sort of like they have a prophecy. They've been telling each other about who's to come to save them. They've been afflicted. And anyway, he's going to be the one. But he's so innocent. He's like, well, I don't know. I kill whatever I can to make dinner. And so that's part of what I identified with him. But there's another part of this story that I think is interesting to me and about me. I was so taken with this other, it's just a different kind of music. He doesn't write like other composers. And this is, I'm not the first person to assert that. It's well known. And so I was so taken with how different this music was that I did a lot of reading about it. And I found out that Wagner himself had started a foundation when he was still alive that would allow musicians from around the world to come to Bayreuth, where he built his theater and performed these operas, and see them and experience them and learn about them. And so I didn't know how to get, that I didn't have their address. They don't publicize this. And so I just wrote to the Chamber of Commerce in the city of this little Bavarian city of Bayreuth. It's like, maybe 30,000 people live there, right? Mm-hmm. Of course, in August, the city fills up with lots of people for the festival. But I thought, well, I'll write to the Chamber of Commerce and see if they could hook me up with the Wagner Foundation. Well, it turns out the guy who is the mayor, and it's a small town, and runs the Chamber of Commerce, is also the head of the Wagner Foundation.
Nice. Perfect.
So he put me in touch with people where I lived that would interview me to see if I could, I was a candidate for this scholarship. So there was something about the adventurousness, the willingness to try, to put myself out there.
Innovative and creative. Right. Courage.
I had a nice interview with this little old woman, who represented the Wagner Stiftung, and afterwards she said, I could tell it was going well, and that she was going to say yes. And so I got really ballsy, and I said, "Can I bring my lover?" Which, I was like thinking the Wagner people are probably very conservative. I don't know if I can bring a male lover along. They pay for it. And so she said, I'll submit it. We'll see, and they wound up paying for both of us to go.
Wow.
Wow. And you get lodging and delicious food for all the meals for a week. And every day there's a lecture on the opera for that evening. And, so you can familiarize yourself with the leitmotifs, and you can hear them when it begins, and they give you a little history and everything. So and then the opera. And it was such an amazing thing to be, we're like bohemians. I'm in a tweed coat, and khaki pants. And these people, most of the people there are very wealthy, like dressed to the nines, long dresses and jewelry and tuxedos,
Right.
And here we are, like a couple of graduate students who got in somehow to this amazing experience.
And I assume that your lover, your partner, was also much appreciative of the experience, the music.
Yeah, very, very much. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Look at your joy, your passion, as you're telling the story. I'm hoping that this story is going to be in your book, the whole story.
Yes, it is. It will be. Yes, I was just working on it today. So, so that it's interesting how that shows you something about me, but my telling it, right?
Yeah.
But what is true about me and how I live my life.
Yeah. And, this is may feel a little off topic, but I think it may be closer to on topic than that first glance it looks like. But I've got this idea, this theory, that when babies are born, they are souls that have a history already, and that they come into these bodies with pre-baked personalities and preferences. And when I hear you talk about this, you're describing with enthusiasm and joy something that I would just turn down in a heartbeat. I would not put my life's energy into this because it's not something that I'm interested in. But look at you. Look how interested you are in it. And so I think absolutely it says something about who you are and reflects, what brings us joy, what makes time just disappear, what puts us into the flow, what pulls us forward, like in an undeniable way. Like we can't not do it. We can't not do it. We got to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I subscribe to that same theory. I learned it somewhere else that we're not like blank slates when we come into this life.
Yeah.
But we've got call it karma, in a good sense and in a bad sense. And so I think some of these experiences that we might consider difficult or challenging, we chose them so that we could transform that karma and get freer and freer from one life to the next.
Yeah. I don't know that I understand karma. I think I'm open to it and it's interesting. I just think that whatever we've experienced and however many lifetimes that we've lived, by the time we land in these bodies, shows up in what we find humorous. And I mean, there's babies that they don't even smile for the first 6 months of their lives. And then there's babies that are practically laughing on their way out the womb. And then there's everything in between as well. And it's just so interesting. I've always been fascinated with babies, to watch their personalities as they develop in the days after they're born. Incredible. And I think that shows up. I mean, who they are at 5 days old is who we're going to see them being at 25 years old or 55.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So I was sort of thinking about this topic last night that we might talk about today. And I wondered, because I noticed when you talk about your experiences in the grocery stores, in the grocery industry, that there's something that feels very Bill about those experiences. And I wondered, like, would you say that, like, for me, the experience of learning about Wagner's music is something telling about me, that your experiences in the grocery industry tells you something about the true you?
I think so. I think, that, and the way that I often will talk about my experience, 21 years in the grocery business, and most of the careers that I've had, with the exception of coaching, is that I loved it and I hated it. And I think both of those extremes tell me and anybody that's watching about me. What is it that I hated, and what is it that I loved, and the in between loving and hating was me just wanting, but not knowing how to get back to loving it again. I loved being creative. I loved being independent. I loved being autonomous. I loved being able to take actions that created results, rewards.
Right. That's one of the things I remember you saying, like it made a difference how things were stacked, where things were on display, and about what got sold. And I was so fascinated to hear that about you.
Yeah. Another example of that showed up when I was, and interestingly, I didn't write about this in my book, and I'm surprised I didn't, because it's such a fun memory for me. But when we were living in Great Falls, Montana, I'm 15, 16 years old and really into baseball. I mean, I loved baseball. And what I loved most about it, besides playing it in the backyard, I wasn't very good when it came to competing, but I loved playing catch and hitting the ball and playing 500 out in the field and that sort of thing. But I loved the statistics part of it. I'm surprised I didn't end up being a CPA. So I got a couple of poster boards and set up a scoreboard for the American League and the National League in 1971. And I had it downstairs in the unused kitchen on the counter. And I had cut little holes in it and cut out little numbers that I could replace so that I could keep track of the wins and losses for every team on both leagues. And I would change that every day. I would look at the newspaper in the morning to see who won and who lost, and then I would change my standings. I did that every day through, well, at least one season. That's 165 games for, I don't know. I think at that time there were 12 teams that were playing. And so that interest in numbers and seeing things change and rooting for a team. Well, I was my own team, and the store that I was working on was my team, and there were things that I could do to hit a home run and things I could do to strike out, and I just loved that. I really enjoyed it. I love playing the game of life.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I remember when my dad would take us we lived on the other side of the Mississippi from St. Louis, but close. And so we'd go to Busch. At that time, it was Busch Stadium where the Cardinals played.
Yeah.
And I was the one who kept score. I had this chart, and I kept track of every bat, every walk, the whole thing, and all the statistics. I was into that.
What year would that have been that you would have been at Busch Stadium?
Somewhere between 1970 and 1977.
Well, that's pretty. So I was there in 1969 at Busch Stadium because we at that time lived in Topeka, Kansas, and most of my relatives lived in Kansas City and Independence, Missouri. One day, my Uncle Tom, my dad, my brother, and I drove across Missouri for a Cardinals game. Great memory.
Yeah, so back to keeping track, there's something very compelling, when statistics, they don't lie. They tell you, and they develop slowly, and at the end of the day, you add them up, and either this team won or that team won, and that, they don't, that's it, they're truth-telling.
Yeah. And as we're talking about this right now, I think part of my interest in things like statistics and keeping track of numbers and the way to measure to win or lose has to do with survival mechanisms that I developed growing up too.
Oh, wow.
I believe that, I heard years and years ago what landed initially as bizarre, a statement that landed just as bizarre to me. And that was that children are begging for boundaries. That wasn't my experience as a father. It didn't seem like that. That's not the way that I viewed my kids.
Children I will say it again. Children
are begging for boundaries.
Begging for boundaries.
My kids rebelled against any boundary that I would set for them. So but then one day I thought, well, that can't be right. They're not begging. I don't see in any way, shape, or form how they're begging me for boundaries. But then as I started watching after I heard that, I realized that, in fact, yes, that they have to have boundaries, even though they might rebel and push back against them. They really want them so that they know what's safe and what isn't, so that they know how far they can go and when they have to stop. The best example of that is my daughter, Sarah, who was, 12 or 13 years old. And she was on the phone. And in those days, the phone was attached to the wall with a long 20-foot cord where she could walk around the corner and keep her conversation secret. So much has changed over these years. Anyhow, she stayed in the kitchen where I happened to be sitting at the kitchen table when she took this call from, let's just say, Mary. And she says, "Oh, hi, Mary. I don't know. Let me ask." And she covers the phone, but not really, and says, "Hey, Dad, can I spend the night at Mary's?" And she's shaking her head no. And I got it. I said, "Oh, absolutely not. You haven't done your homework and you've got to get caught up on your chores. You have to stay home tonight." "Oh, I'm sorry, Mary. I can't spend the night." So that's an extreme example maybe of how kids are begging for boundaries. But I think there's the same thing goes with statistics. Like, how am I doing? What's the score?
Yeah.
How well are we doing? I've got a scoreboard up here to my left that keeps track of my coaching business and how I'm doing in my business. And I love playing the game of business almost as much as I love coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. Order.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. From chaos came the need for order. Exactly. That's what I think is going on, and maybe why I
mhm,
have such an interest in that. And yet, there's more to it than just that. That there's something about that really draws me,
mhm,
has me very, very interested. Who knows?
mhm,
Maybe I was one of the Wright brothers or something, was trying to figure stuff out in a previous life. Who knows
mhm.
how to calculate engineering and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can identify with that in a lot of ways. I'm thinking of a lot of it, my own, like the baseball statistics is one of them, but there are other things. And so I can see that in you, and I can see that in me. I think the thing about Wagner, one of the things that it tells about me is that I like to escape,
Fantasize.
right? To be absorbed in another reality, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And and that, I did a lot of that as a kid because I didn't want to be around, dad yelling at mom, and my brother's getting in trouble. I just wanted to get away from it all, and go down in the basement and work on my train set, or go read an engrossing novel. Like I did a lot of that as a kid.
Are you writing about that in your book? I hope you are. I hope you do. I think it's all relevant. I think it all fits together.
No, I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's true.
Like,
Um,
why were you drawn to books? It's because you found the beauty in books. Why were you drawn to working on your train set? Because you found beauty in that experience.
yeah, right.
And
Yeah.
you call it escapism,
There was an order, like a love of order in that too, because there's electricity flowing through those tracks,
right?
and you have to get it right, or the train doesn't work. Like especially when you start, it's not just a circle, but when you start adding switches
Mm-hmm.
and other directions that the trains can go, and other trains on the same track, and it gets complicated for electricity. That was part of my fascination with it.
Yeah. Always the scientist, huh? What works, what doesn't.
Yeah, yeah. Are there other things that you can think of that were like sort of that are revealing of the true you, experiences that you've had, that not necessarily like in a being coached, but where it's just somehow speaks for who you are.
Ready to discover your true self? Our free live PERTS work practice sessions guide you through IFS exercises to connect you with your PERTS. Begin your journey at pertsworkpractice.com. Now back to the show. Yeah, this is maybe a different aspect of what you're asking about, but I think it's just as it's in the same category of what we're talking about now, and that is that internal guidance system. And I think you and I have talked about this before. I absolutely believe that we all have an internal guidance system, and that the way it seems to work is that when I am experiencing joy and interest and curiosity authentically, that my guidance system is saying, yeah, move in that direction. And when I'm experiencing displeasure, if I'm suffering, experiencing discomfort,
Yeah.
then my internal guidance system wants me to pay attention to that as well.
Uh-huh.
For example, I have an internal timer that tells me when it's time to leave. If I don't have speaking of boundaries, if I don't have a closed in, this is how long I can be here doing this thing,
Yeah.
then something inside says, okay, this has been enough.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that tells us something about ourselves and about each other as well. Not from a place of judgment or valuation, but just that if we're to trust ourselves, then I think that we need to pay attention to everything that happens that's involuntary, and most of it is. That's what I've noticed, is that most of my life, unless I'm very conscious about it, very intentional about it, most of my life is pretty automatic.
Right.
So that internal, after 47 minutes of, let's say, sitting and watching my friend's daughter at a gymnastics meet, it was time. It was just time. My body needed to leave.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I didn't love what I'd experienced up to that point, or the people that I was hanging out with, it just was time to leave. And I don't know why that it was time to leave at that point, but it was, and it worked out well. And I don't know if it's because I avoided being in an accident if I'd left 3 minutes later or an hour later, or what it was about. But I've just grown to really trust at these internal indications of it's time to move or leave or stop or start, that I need to pay attention to those things. And then that indicates, and we've talked a little bit about this as well, to me, that points to that the authentic me is not contained in this body, that the authentic me draws from resources that go well beyond what I'm consciously aware of it as the me that's experiencing this earthly life.
Yeah. I love that, that there's something that is authentically you, the true you, that is not contained in your body.
Yeah. In fact, the body might be contained within whatever that is.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or they may just only be vaguely, remotely related to each other. I used to have a friend who would say something along the lines, I wish I could say it the way that she did, because it was always very funny the way she said it, but something to do with that the body is just transportation. She just needs the body for transportation.
Right. That's good. Right. That's how we get around, but it's not who we are.
That's right. Yeah. Since we're in this material plane, having this material experience, we need to have a body so we can move around and pick things out.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of one of the other things that I don't know, somehow it feels to me very telling about the true me. My best meditation experiences, the ones where I would really was not thinking for a long time, and was just free and blissful and deeply into it. That has always happened when I was sitting in a group. I've never had as deep an experience on my own as I've had sitting with others. And there have been a couple times when, it was particularly one time when I was living in New York City, and this buddy and I, we rented a loft. I mean, a commercial loft space. The rest of the floors in this building were full of carpeting from the east. There was just a storage building, but the fifth floor hadn't been filled up yet, and we rented it from this Indian guy. This is on 27th Street, just off of Broadway in New York City, and we lived there for a couple of years in this huge, 5,000-foot space.
Nice.
A warehouse with a little kitchen in the corner and a bathroom, and we had great, parties and stuff there. One time I invited my meditation group over, and everybody brought, we had a potluck dinner, and we had dinner, and then we went to the other end of the space, and we sat in a circle, and we just let ourselves go into meditation. And I think we sat for 2 hours, all of us completely just gone.
Wow.
It was amazing. It was one of the best meditations I've ever had. And so I think that that being in a community is part of it.
Yeah.
And letting go of the need to think, or the desire to think, and just be together with no conversation. It really, I don't know, it was something I value hugely.
I'm thinking of a book that I read about this, about the power of prayer and meditation in groups. Often I'll see on social media somebody's had a tragedy or a scary thing is happening. Someone got hit by a car, now they're in the hospital, and the comments on Facebook often will be thoughts and prayers. And then someone will also comment, keep your thoughts and your prayers to yourself. Who needs that? That's worthless. But the fact is that and I say it as a fact because I believe this is so, that prayer actually is powerful and it really works.
Mhm.
And regardless and my beliefs have changed over the years, and I've thought about this when I absolutely was angry about the idea that there would be a God. I was mad about it, and then as time's gone on, I'm certainly not angry about it at all. In fact, I believe that now, and so, but still, to me, the idea of prayer is somewhat of a mystery, only in that I wonder why it works
Mhm.
and how it works rather than whether it works. And
Mhm.
so one of the books that I read, I'd love to, I'm going to type it in here and see if I can find it. I'd like to figure out which book it was, but it described how there was a group of people who all gathered in Washington, D.C. and prayed, it might have been TM, for 3 or 4 days straight, with an intention to drop the crime rate
Mhm.
over whatever period of time that was. Maybe it was a month. And they measured before, during, after, historical, and it was clearly, indisputably, that the crime rate dropped.
Oh my
And
gosh.
they had this group of people that were meditating together with that intention.
Mhm.
So when you talk about meditation in a group, I absolutely think that there's something happening there that I don't understand, but I'm fascinated by.
Well, one of the things is, I feel like I can let go. Like, okay, we're all doing this together. Like, I don't have to be on, like, when I'm alone, there's part of me that, has to be on guard because I'm alone and I might need to defend myself or
Yeah.
just answer the
Right.
phone or whatever. But when we're all doing it together, there's like this, you're safe, we're all doing this. And so it's, that I think that's a part of it. But I also think that, like if you take that example that you just
Yeah.
said, you extend it. Let's say like that you got 100,000 people to sit around the world,
Yeah.
or 2 million people all over the world. Well, the crime rate would go down in part because those
Everybody
2
busy
million people weren't out committing crimes. That's one reason. That's one way it works. but but you are actually creating peace on earth.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not
Right.
finding the book that I was hoping it would hop out on off the page, but Lynn McTaggart, I think anything that she writes is worth reading. She wrote a book called The Power of Eight about this. And then you're old enough to remember, I think this is from the 80s. Somebody had written about the 100th monkey. Does that sound familiar? What do you remember about that? Because I might just massacre the explanation of it. If you understand it, I want to hand it to you.
I don't know.
Well,
I remember that this isn't about, go ahead.
well, what I remember about it is okay. I'll stop looking over there. That there were 2 islands of monkeys, and these monkeys were being observed on both islands, and it had something to do with how the monkeys were opening the coconuts and getting the milk and eating the meat of the coconut. And on one island, it was observed that 1 or 2 monkeys had figured out that they could bang the coconuts on a rock or bang rocks on the coconut and crack them open.
Uh-huh.
And when other monkeys on that same island saw them doing that, they very quickly adapted that strategy. And now all the monkeys on that island are doing that to open up the coconut. And they say the 100th monkey. When the 100th monkey adapted that strategy, all of a sudden, all the monkeys on the other island that were completely disconnected from this island began the same strategy.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, this is the other thing that brings up the other thing that I wanted to say about the group meditation and the bringing the crime rate down and everything. I think what it illustrates, I'm going to say, to me, is the oneness of human mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you know, yes, I have a different brain than you have, but our thinking, there's lots of ways in which we could illustrate that we were not thinking alone. We're thinking to, communally.
Mhm.
We inherit a history of a way of thinking, and then we contribute to that, and we pass it around, and so I think there are lots of other ways to approach this too, but I think that's where I think what it suggests about the true us is that there is a communal mind, there's the shared mind. Besides the individual minds, there's also shared mind. And so yeah, if you get enough of that shared mind on the same peaceful wavelength, or the creative innovative wavelength of the monkeys, it's contagious. Yes, it's through the whole mind.
There's a woman by the name of Brooke Steele who has a very popular podcast and has had for at least the last 12 years now. And she has, the name of her podcast is The Life Coach School. And when I was first coaching and coaching part-time, I searched for podcasts because I was running a lot in those days. And I put my headphones on or earpiece on and I'd go for 7 to 13 mile runs and listen to one episode after the other, after the other, after the other. And one of the things that when I discovered her, even in the first 2 or 3 episodes of her podcast, she talked about her experience with Byron Katie, which really got me interested because by then I had already been listening to Byron Katie for about, not listening, but practicing the method of Byron Katie for about 10, 12 years. And as Brooke Castillo talked about her experience and what she took away from the Byron Katie experience, I was right there with her. I was having the same kinds of experiences that she was having. I loved how she had taken what she'd learned from Byron Katie and installed it into her coaching practice. And I had created a tool. You know me to create all kinds of tools. When I discover things, I create tools. Well, I created a tool called Outcome by Design. And the way it worked was using the logic of Byron Katie, which is that anytime we have thoughts that argue with reality, we suffer. And then suffering, I took it a step further. Suffering is disempowering. If we operate from a place of suffering, we're operating from a place of lack of power.
Mm-hmm.
And so the outcome by design was to notice the results that you're getting and recognize that you're getting the results that you're getting because of the things that you're doing. And you're doing the things that you're doing because of how you feel emotionally. And you feel emotionally how you feel emotionally because of the things that you think. And you think the things that you think because of what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd work that back and forth. Well, so then what you need to do, if you want a different outcome, what is that outcome? What actions would you have to take to get that outcome? How would you have to feel to be willing to take those actions? What would you have to think to have those feelings? And what would you have to believe for those thoughts to just flow freely? And now what can we do to install that belief in you? That's the way I worked back then 13 years ago as a coach.
That's beautiful.
So I'm listening now to Brooke Castillo, and she says, okay, I've got this method called CTFAR. Circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, results. What? I thought she stole it from me. She must have read my material somewhere and she stole it and she rebranded it. I can't believe I'm so mad at Brooke Castillo now for doing that. Mm-hmm. Then I realized, I think this has happened many, many, many times before, where I've gotten this unique idea. Breakfast burritos is another example of this. Breakfast burritos. Nobody had ever thought of breakfast burritos before, and I thought, I should franchise that. And then McDonald's came out with it that same week.
Oh my gosh!
I thought about it. Anyhow, I think
there's a German word for that.
What is it?
Zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist.
Right.
Yeah, I felt a little zeitgeisty.
Right. Geist is the word either for mind or spirit.
Yeah.
Right. You can further distinguish when Germans speak about Geist, they say, well, I mean Geist in the sense of, your mind, your intelligence, or they say, no, I mean spirit like a ghost or,
Mm-hmm.
That's where we get our word ghost, by the way, is from the word Geist.
Mm-hmm.
So that zeitgeist is, that's a concept that a lot of Americans use too. Right. Oh, that the Beatles, they were part of this whole zeitgeist of freedom and
Yeah.
and social justice, or whatever, like that. We use that term quite a bit, and
Yeah.
that's what it means.
Yeah. So this is more evidence, I suppose, of the one mind that we share.
Yeah, I think so too.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all working it. And this also reminds me of these studies in physics. You know, that Einstein was puzzled by, how could this atom, something happens to this atom and it's affecting this other atom on, that's a million miles away.
Yeah.
Well, how did they relate? And so David Bohm comes after Einstein and says, well, his theory is that there never was separation. Nothing is really separated. Any speck of the universe is, it contains all of the information of the whole universe in it. I mean, you think about if you really started to study, I don't know, a grain of sand on a beach in Africa, well, it would connect to where it came from, which relates to history and where all of that, and pretty soon you get the whole history of the universe from it. And so, it might very well be that the reason why this sense of shared mind is there is because, we never were really separate.
Right. Yes. Yes.
The separation is the illusion, and the truth is that it's all connected.
Right. Yeah. Love that. Now, is it Elizabeth? What's her last name? She Eat, Pray, Love.
Gilbert?
Is it Elizabeth Gilbert? She wrote another book since then that talks about, Big Magic is the name of that book. And it's a fantastic book. And she tells about this inspiration for a book that she was going to write.
Mm-hmm.
But this happened, that happened, and she wasn't able to get the book written. Years later, she falls in love with this other author who's written some great stuff. And she's at one of her events, and they sit down for coffee, and the author that she gets to know is telling her about a book that she's inspired to write. And it's the book that Elizabeth wasn't able to write years earlier. It is almost precisely the book that, so her theory about that is that we have these muses that come visit us with these ideas, and they don't hang around long. If we don't grab the idea and do something with it, they'll go to somebody that's more receptive than we are. Mm-hmm. I love that. I mean, that is exciting to think about that.
Yeah, well, and it's not
into.
It's not that in itself is not just her idea either. That the muses go way back to ancient times. But and that's the Greeks talked about the muses and built statues of them and everything. So that that's another aspect of the communal mind that she's expressing there.
Right, and it kind of explains how before we had language and writing, that information would get passed on, and I guess what I understood at one point was that, well, it must be passed on from one generation to the next, to the next, and this legacy wisdom that Aboriginal people share without the common ways to collect and store data that we have now.
Right.
But it appears it's more like the ability to tap into and access the archives in that shared mind space.
Mm-hmm.
In the other podcast that I really began to enjoy a couple of years ago was the telepathy tapes, and she talks a lot in the telepathy tapes about the same dynamic.
Well, I think that's why people like the Dalai Lama, or the Buddha, or Jesus, or Muhammad, they're accessing the archives, and that's why they say these things that are so true for everybody for all times, because they're living in that reality of the connectedness of it all.
Yeah. I think so. This, just to wrap up here before we end, I want to just kind of think about some of the things that we talked about here and kind of where we ended up going. You were talking about lived experience and how that reflects who we really are.
Mhm.
And you talked about that in relationship to the book that you're writing on beauty, and we ended up talking about memoirs there for a little while, and now look where the conversation's gone, way beyond this singular identity of who I am as true self to basically who we are as true people, as a
Right. And who I am as us,
yes,
who you are as us.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's right, What a interesting conversation. I really appreciate it. We neither of us knew where this was going to go. I'm really glad you brought it up.
Well, thank you for indulging me in, and that's something we didn't know where it was going to go. I appreciate your willingness to come along.
Before we end, I wonder if I can put you on the spot, and if it's a no, then we'll just cut this out of the end of the podcast episode. But I wanted to follow up with you from the coaching that you and I did a couple of weeks ago that was released just last week, I believe, as an episode.
Yeah. Thank you for asking about that. I could say a lot about it, but let me be brief. It has impacted me enormously. I redid my plan for 2026 in a much more creative way. And I got in touch with the part of me that is just at home and being creative, like knows that I am creative and that I'm good at it and that I love it. And so I have a whole new lease on life for this year after that.
Well,
Yeah, I know that I'm a virtuoso at it. In fact, like that's where I'm coming from, as opposed to, oh my God, how am I going to navigate these difficult waters and get over the constraints put on me by society? Like I'm not in that space at all. I know that I'm creating my reality and I'm happily doing it. It's fun. Like I walk around my apartment and I'm just like a little kid, like, oh, this is so fun. What I'm making of this life. So it was profound and helpful.
wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with me. One more thing I want to just say before we end, and that is that we have a bunch of guests signed up to join us here for the next couple of months. We will have a woman by the name of Marisa Skloski. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She's going to be joining us. She reached out to us and showed an interest in being a guest. And once she filled out her application, you and I both looked at it and said, yeah, let's get her on the show. Mm-hmm. And there's Jerry Waxler, who, as you said, joined us last year, and we're looking for it. He's my memoir coach, and he's a memoir writer and also an IFS therapist. So
it's rubbed off on me as well, even though I haven't, hired him to help me. I've learned a lot already.
Oh, yeah. He's got so much to teach. Just in a single conversation, there's so much to glean from him. And then there's Nick Mima, a mutual friend of both yours and mine, who's in our coaching excellence team that meets every Friday morning. And it'll be great to have Nick on. He's got a wealth of experience and knowledge and wisdom. And we're gonna have some of the authors of the Parts Work Guidebook. My fellow authors, Allison and Eileen, will be joining us for one episode. So there'll be four of us on the podcast episode that day.
That'd be fun. I can't wait.
And then also Morgan, another one of the authors. She's living in Michigan, and she's signed up as well. So we'll have her on the show as well. And we're hoping to have Noga, the fifth and final author of the Parts Work Guidebook. And the reason that we want to have everybody on the show, all of these authors of the Parts Work Guidebook, is that we've released the Kindle version of it now, and the print version should be out here in about a month. And Eileen and I are working on the audiobook, so we're hoping in 2 to 3 months we'll have the audiobook out as well. So it should be fun having all these guests.
Yeah, we got a lot of great episodes coming up.
Marty, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you, Bill.
Bye.
Bye.
We appreciate who you are, that you would be listening to this podcast, and want to acknowledge all those parts of you that yearn for the experience of the true you.
If you like this episode, click like, share it with others, and be sure to subscribe. Listen again next week for the newest episode.
Check show notes for a transcript and a link to resources, including a link to let us know if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast.
Thank you for listening and going on this journey with us back to the true you.